Noah's Ark. The story of Noah's Ark has often been considered an esoteric allegory. The myth, however, is not simply an allegory of the general idea of esotericism, but at the same time it is a plan of any esoteric work. The system itself is an ark, in which humanity can be saved at the time of the flood. So far, we have looked at the table of hydrogens as a table of vibrations and the densities of matter that are in an inverse proportion to them. We must now understand that the density of vibrations and the density of matter express many other properties of matter. For example, till now we have said nothing of the intelligence or the consciousness of the matter. The speed or frequency of vibration of any material shows the degree of intelligence of the given matter. Remember that there is nothing dead or inanimate in nature, absolutely nothing. Everything in its own way is alive, everything in its own way is intelligent and conscious. Only this intelligence and this consciousness is expressed in a different way, on different levels of being, that is, on different scales. It is important to understand that nothing is inanimate in nature, that there are simply different degrees of animation, and on different scales. The table of hydrogens, while serving to determine the density of matter and the speed of vibrations, serves at the same time to determine the degree of intelligence and consciousness, because the degree of consciousness corresponds to the degree of density, or the speed of vibration. This means that the denser the matter, the less conscious it is, and the less intelligent. Conversely, the denser the vibration, the more conscious, and the more intelligent the matter. Dead matter really begins where vibrations cease. However, under ordinary conditions of life on the Earth's surface, we have no concern with dead matter, and science cannot procure it. All the matter we know of is living matter, and in its own way it is intelligent. In determining the degree of density of matter, the table of hydrogens also determines by this, the degree of intelligence. Which means that in making comparisons between the matters that occupy different places in the table of hydrogens, we determine not only their density, but also their intelligence. Not only can we say how many times this or that hydrogen is denser, or lighter than another, but we can also say how many times one hydrogen is more intelligent than another. The application of the table of hydrogens, for the determination of the different properties of things, and of living creatures that consist of many hydrogens, is based upon the principle that in every living creature, and in each living thing, there is one definite hydrogen, that is the center of gravity. It is, so to speak, the average hydrogen, of all the hydrogens constituting that given creature or thing. To find this average hydrogen, we need to speak of living creatures, where first of all it is necessary to know the level of being, of the creature in question. The level of being is primarily determined by the number of stories, or levels in that given mechanism. So far we have spoken only about man, and have taken man as a three-story structure, a three-tiered mechanism. We cannot, however, speak about animals and man in the same breath, because animals differ in a radical way from human beings. The highest animal we know of consists of 2 levels, and the lowest, of only 1 level. A man consists of 3 stories or tiers. A sheep consists of 2 levels. A worm consists of only 1 level. At the same time, the lower and middle levels of man are, so to speak, equivalent to the sheep, and the lower story, to the worm. So that it can be said that a man consists of a man, a sheep and a worm. Then that a sheep consists of a sheep and a worm. Man is a complex creature, because the level of our being is determined by the level of being of the creatures of which we are composed. The sheep, and the worm, may play a bigger or a smaller part in us, hence the term, sheeple, and we all refer to the worm in us, whenever someone is being sleazy, or as low as a serpent. Thus the worm plays the chief role in man number 1, the sheep in man number 2, and in man number 3 it is man. These definitions, however, are important only in individual cases, and in a more general sense man is determined by the center of gravity of the middle level. The center of gravity of the middle level of human being is hydrogen 96. The intelligence of hydrogen 96 determines the average intelligence of man, that is the physical body. The center of gravity of the astral body will be hydrogen 48. The center of gravity of the third body will be hydrogen 24, and the center of gravity of the fourth body will be hydrogen 12. Recall the diagram of the 4 bodies of man that was given previously, in which the average hydrogens of the upper story were shown. It will be easier to understand what is about to be said. The center of gravity of the upper story is 1 hydrogen higher than the center of gravity of the middle story. The center of gravity of the middle story is 1 hydrogen higher than the center of gravity of the lower story. However, as previously stated, to determine the level of being by the table of hydrogens, it is usual to take the middle story. With this as a starting point, it is possible to examine the following question. Let's suppose that Jesus Christ is man number 8, then how many times is Jesus Christ more intelligent than a table? A table has no stories, it lies wholly between hydrogen 1536 and hydrogen 3072, according to the third scale of the table of hydrogens. Man number 8, on the other hand, is hydrogen 6. This is the center of gravity of the middle story of man number 8. If we are then to calculate how many times hydrogen 6 is more intelligent than hydrogen 1536, we can know how many times man number 8 is more intelligent than a table. However, in this regard, it must be remembered that intelligence is determined not by the density of the matter, but by the density of vibrations. Also that the density of vibrations increases not by doubling, as in the octaves of hydrogens, but in an entirely different progression, which many times outnumbers the first. If you know the exact coefficient of this increase, you will be in a position to solve the problem. It is only important, however, to demonstrate that however strange it might appear, the problem can actually be solved mathematically. Partly in connection with what has just been said, it is imperative that we also understand the principles of the classification and the definition of living beings from the cosmic point of view, from the point of view of their cosmic existence. In ordinary science, classification is made according to external traits, such as bones, teeth, functions, mammals, vertebrates, rodents, and so on. In exact knowledge, classification is made according to cosmic traits. There are in fact exact traits, identical, for every living thing, that allow us to establish the class and the species of a given creature, with the utmost exactitude, both in relation to other creatures, as well as to their own place in the universe. These traits are the traits of being. The cosmic level of being of every living creature is determinable. First of all, by what this creature eats. Secondly, by what it breathes. Thirdly, by the medium in which it lives. These are the three cosmic traits of being. Take then, for example, man. We feed on hydrogen 768, breathe hydrogen 192, and live in hydrogen 192. There is no other being like us on this planet. Although there are beings that are higher than we are. Animals such as dogs can feed on hydrogen 768, but they can also feed on a lower hydrogen, not 768 but approaching 1536, food of a kind impossible for man. A bee feeds on a hydrogen much higher than 768, even higher than 384, however it lives in a hive, an atmosphere where man could not live. From an outward point of view, man is an animal, however we are an animal of a different order from other animals. Let's take another example, a flower worm. It feeds on flour, a hydrogen far coarser than hydrogen 768, because the worm can also live on rotten flour, so let's say this also is 1536. It breathes hydrogen 192, and it lives in hydrogen 1536. A fish feeds on hydrogen 1536, lives in hydrogen 384, and it breathes hydrogen 192. A tree feeds on hydrogen 1536, breathes only partly hydrogen 192, and partly hydrogen 96, then it lives partly in hydrogen 192, and partly in hydrogen 3072, or the soil. If we continue with these definitions, it can be seen that this plan, so simple at first glance, makes it possible to determine the most subtle distinctions between classes of living beings, particularly if you bear in mind that hydrogens, taking them as we have by octaves, are a very broad concept. For example, we took it that a dog, a fish and a flower worm alike, feed on hydrogen 1536, implying by this hydrogen, substances of organic origin, that are not good for human food. Then if you realize that these substances in their turn, can be divided into different classes, we see the possibility of very exact definitions. It is exactly the same with air, and the same with the medium, or the ecosystem that a creature inhabits. These cosmic traits of being, are then connected with definitions of intelligence, according to the table of hydrogens. The intelligence of any matter is therefore determined by the creature for whom it can serve as food. For example, which is more intelligent from this point of view, a raw potato or a baked potato? A raw potato can serve as food for pigs, and a baked potato as food for man. A baked potato is therefore more intelligent than a raw potato. If these principles of classification and definition are understood in the right way, then many things become clear and comprehensible. No living being can change its food at will, or the air that it breathes, or the medium in which it lives. The cosmic order of each being determines its food, as well as the air that it breathes, and the medium in which it lives. When the octaves of food in the three-story factory were referred to earlier, it was noted that all of the finer hydrogen requirements for the working, growth and evolution of the organism were prepared from three kinds of food. From food, in the strictest sense of the word, i.e. natural edibles and drink. From the air that is breathed. From the impressions that are received. Now suppose that we could improve the quality of food and the air that we breathe? Feed, let us say, on hydrogen 384, instead of hydrogen 768, and breathe hydrogen 96 instead of hydrogen 192. How much simpler and easier would the preparation of fine matter in our organism then be? The point is that this is impossible for us to do. The organism is adapted to transform precisely these coarse matters into finer material, and if we give it finer matter, instead of coarse matter, it will not be in a position to transform them, and would soon die. Just as you cannot get a diesel tractor engine to run on methanol racing fuel. Neither food, nor air, can therefore be changed, however impressions can. The quality of the impressions accessible to us are not subject to any cosmic law. Man cannot improve the air that he breathes, we cannot improve our food either, as improvement in this case would actually be making things worse. For instance, hydrogen 96, instead of hydrogen 192, would either be rarefied air, or else hot incandescent gas, which we cannot breathe, because fire is hydrogen 96. It is exactly the same with food. Hydrogen 384 is water, therefore if man could improve his food, that is to make it finer, then we would literally have to feed on water and breathe fire. It is clear that this is not possible, however we can improve our impressions to a very high degree, by avoiding mental effluent and garbage or dross, then in such a way introduce fine hydrogens into our organism. It is precisely upon this, that the possibility of evolution is based. A man is not obliged to feed on the dull impressions of ch48, and can have instead both ch24, and ch12, or even h6 and h3. This changes the entire picture, and obviously the person who makes higher hydrogens, the sustenance for the upper story of their mechanism, will certainly differ from one who feeds on the lower hydrogens. There is still another system of classification that we need to understand, which is classification in an altogether different ratio of octaves. In the first classification spoken of, by food, air and medium, we referred to living beings as we know them, including plants, which is to say, individuals. The other classification possible leads beyond the limits of what we could call living beings, both upwards, higher than living beings, as well as downwards, lower than living beings, and it deals not with individuals, but with classes, in a very wide sense. Above all, this classification shows that there are no jumps whatsoever in nature. In nature everything is connected, and everything is alive. The diagram of this classification is known as the diagram of everything living. According to this diagram, every kind of creature, every degree of being, is defined by what serves as food for it, or sustenance, for this particular kind of creature or being of a given level, and then for what they themselves serve as food. Because in the cosmic order, each class of creature feeds on a definite class of lower creature, and is food itself for a definite class of higher creatures. Each square in the diagram illustrated denotes a level of being. The hydrogen in the lower circle shows what the given class of creatures feeds upon. The hydrogen in the upper circle shows the class that feeds upon these creatures. The hydrogen in the middle circle is the average hydrogen of its class, showing what these creatures are. The place of man is the seventh square from the bottom or the fifth square from the top. According to this diagram, man is hydrogen 24, he feeds on hydrogen 96 and is himself food for hydrogen 6. The square next below man will be vertebrates, the next invertebrates, and so on. Invertebrates are hydrogen 96, and consequently man feeds upon invertebrates. Do not for the moment look for contradictions, but try to understand what this might mean. Equally, do not compare this diagram with others, as according to the diagram of food, man feeds on hydrogen 768, but according to this diagram we feed on hydrogen 96. Why and what does this mean? Both the one and the other are right, and later this will be grasped, hence everything can be pieced together into one whole. The square next below is plants. The next, minerals, the next, metals, which constitute a separate cosmic group among minerals. The square following has no name in our language, because we never meet with matter in this state, upon the Earth's surface. This square comes into contact with the Absolute. Recall previously, that we spoke of wholly the firm, this is wholly the firm. At the bottom of the last square is placed a small triangle with its apex below. On the other side of man is square, 3, 12, 48. This is a class of creatures that we do not know, but let's call them angels. The next square, 1, 6, 24, could therefore be called archangels. In the following square, 2 circles, with a point in their centers, and the figures 3 and 12, this is the eternal unchanging. In the next square are the figures 1 and 6, a circle, and in the middle, a triangle containing another circle, with a point in its center, this is the Absolute. This diagram will at first appear vague, however gradually we can learn to make it out, but for the time being, we'll need to regard it as separate from the rest. The angels, referred to in this diagram, could also be likened to planets, the archangels to suns, in the cosmic sense. However, what can also be confusing is the appearance of hydrogen 6144, which was absent from the previous scale of hydrogens, the one that ended in hydrogen 3072. This is because it is an incomplete hydrogen, and not taken in accordance with the third scale, as are all the others. It is a hydrogen without the Holy Ghost, that is to the third scale, yet unfinished. Each complete hydrogen is composed of carbon, oxygen and nitrogen. However, taking the last hydrogen of the third scale, hydrogen 3072, this hydrogen is composed of carbon 512, oxygen 1526 and nitrogen 1024. Further on, nitrogen becomes carbon for the next triad, but there is no oxygen for it, and no nitrogen, therefore by condensation it becomes itself hydrogen 6144. However, it is a dead hydrogen, without the possibility of passing into something further, a hydrogen without the Holy Ghost.